Welcome to Producer's Toolbox. I'm Carol Adrian, your host, and today we have part 2 of this awesome series we are doing on writing. I want to just say that if you are a budding screenwriter, we do have an entire segment called Your Awesome Screenplay, which you can bring up on demand. But we have 3 actual real writers today. We have Brian Storm, writer of books, Brendan Dahl, writer of plays, and Gabe Castro, writer of television. So today, these guys are going to share their experience and give advice for anybody out there who would like to get their feet wet in these particular genres. So how about if we start with Gabe? How did you get into it, and how do you suggest other people get into it? Let's talk about how you got in first.
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting journey for all of them, but I think the start of my journey is PhillyCam, actually. So the local Philadelphia community access and TV radio station, which allows you to, take classes and be part of crews and create content with no pressure, because you get to make whatever you want. So it is people powered, right? It is your freedom of speech at work. And so you really get to know how to create a production. You get to do it in this safe environment and with other creatives. And so because of that, I was able to do whatever I wanted. But a part of that too was connecting with other creatives and becoming a part of their projects. So the way that I was able to actually get the bigger of the jobs, the one that was actually people pay me for, was the Mystery Science Theater 3000 writers room. And the way we got into that was actually from a local show called The Black Tribbles, which is a nerd talk show.
Tribbles?
Yes, it's based on them. Yes. So it's a geek talk radio show that featured primarily people of color kind of talking about their geek experiences. And I was a part of that group. And the creator of Mystery Science Theater, Joel Hodgson, found us and sought us out because he really loved our brand of comedy. They were primarily a podcast radio show. And then I actually made them into a TV program as well. We have these short videos that he was able to see and then come and find us. So the the long answer for that is essentially to just do things, right? With whatever resources you have, start creating, even if it doesn't look exactly the way that you were thinking or imagining. It's somewhere to start, and it's how you learn and start making those connections. And then you don't know who's watching, right? Anyone could be, and they might open doors for new things. And they're going to appreciate that you had the initiative to even create that. So that's what happened to me. It was completely surprising. So, but I'm very appreciative for that experience.
I think you've pointed out something really important. My mom used to say, you have to give a miracle a chance to happen, but you need to be in the arena. And getting into that arena, if you're a budding television writer, I think Gabe made a great point. The public access cable stations, I may not have the right total term here, but I know I kind of got inducted in through MLTV, which produces Producer's Toolbox, and expanded from there. But once you're in there, whether you're a volunteer taking classes or bringing your own ideas to it, being in that arena allows you to possibly get seen by somebody who can help further your work. Now, I'm actually going to jump in on Brian Storm's thing. I'm going to give Brian a lead in here because I have, to my surprise, just written a book as well. I had no intention of doing so, but it was an offer I couldn't turn down. And the way that happened, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I wanted to do a picture book to go with my documentary series. And so I asked my BFF, Google, how to find a literary agent, because I had heard that publishers prefer to talk to an agent and not to an author. So I Googled best literary agencies in New York, Why Start Small. Anyway, I found 2, and all they wanted for a submission was your contact information. So name, address, email, and they wanted a short synopsis of what you were proposing as a book. What was the story? And it was very magical. I submitted that. It took me about 7 minutes, and I had a synopsis from grant proposals. And I thought, what do I have to lose? And somebody called me and said, we think we see a book here. And by gosh, my book, Healing a Divided Nation, how the American Civil War revolutionized Western medicine, will be in stores in August. So now, but Brian went a very different and equally valid path, which is you have self-published, my friend, which is quite an undertaking. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. I guess, self-publishing for me, it just seemed like the easier route. But after doing it, I'm realizing that it's not so easy.
You want to talk to my BFF now.
Yeah. But it is good because I was able to have full control. I was able to pick my own book cover design. I was able to make the book as long or as short as I wanted it to be. I didn't really have any deadlines I have to make. So it really worked out for me. Like I was able to work at my own pace. And for me, that was a lot because I work a full-time job. So
you have a family. Yeah,
I have a family, I have a lot of animals to rescue. So, I don't always have time to meet deadlines and stuff like that. So, right. So what I did, like, there's companies out there, like Amazon or Ingram Spark that you can go and you can self-publish through them. You don't need any expertise or anything like that. But the downfall is you really have to make sure your work is perfect, because if it's not, then it's going to be published like that. If you have one spelling mistake, if you have one word missing or a double word or two spaces in between the period, it's going to be published no matter what. So you have to keep that in mind, and I learned that the hard way with my first book that I wrote. I just kind of ran it through Microsoft Word. And I submitted it, and then I had like 100 people come and tell me, "Oh, you made this mistake, you made that mistake." So I had to learn the hard way, and that's part of the reason why I'm rewriting this book now. I'm making sure I'm doing it right this time, and I just want to get it perfect. Then I'm also doing the last 10 years of my life with this too, in this new book.
I think, it's a really good point about that, because while I've been going through the process and I thought, whoa, nobody's telling Brian what to do, and they keep sending me edits where they insert 3,000 commas from the copy editor, and you have to go through and approve every single one. And it was just like, and there's different software with each edit. And I think we've been through 6 or 7 edits so far. And each time there's some misspelling. And I think, how could I have missed that? But I'm so glad that other eyes are looking at it, because yes. I think I think it's just a function of the human brain. When you're looking at a sentence and you expect it to say plant, but it says plan, you're still going to perceive it as plant. And so you just blow right past a lot of misspellings and stuff. So that may be an appealing route next time, but it also is, you really take all that responsibility on yourself for all those corrections, which is pretty stressful.
Yes.
Brendan, with a play, with a script, do yours go past other eyes, or are you the sole proprietor there, responsible for getting it perfect?
So I think for playwrights especially, readings are the absolute best thing you can do. For me, I always try to have readings of early drafts of the play if it's something I'm excited about, and oftentimes that will bring up if there are grammatical mistakes, formatting errors, or even more just things that don't sound right, that don't, feel right to the characters, or that just come on and hit my ear weirdly. That is like one of my best, revising strategies. I'd say so. I haven't been able to like publish any full script yet. I've had been lucky to have a few productions, but I haven't actually gone through the process of publishing a script. Usually, it takes quite a few productions for a script to get approached by one of the major publishers, and then there isn't as much of a reason to publish on your own. But I send a lot of scripts to different theater companies, and yeah, I'd say usually I'm the only one that's like reading for with an editor's eye, but having that reading process, and I usually have 6-7 drafts of a script before I've even really sent it to any theater company. It gets to the point where it's pretty tight, and it's pretty. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there'll still be a few typos here and there, but it's pretty good at that point.
Wow. Now, when we did our show on writing screenplays, that is a very defined and perfectionistic way that it has to be presented. The margins, the spacing, how characters are introduced. Are scripts for the stage that precise as well?
No, they're really not. And that's actually one of the things I love about playwriting too. For me, actually, the way that I choose to put the play on the page is another creative element. I'm really drawn to writers that experiment with formatting to give directions. I know a lot of people experiment with like font size for different like volumes or intensities. People use all different kinds of like paragraph breaks. Different. I wrote a play where I used emoticons to represent like fake emotions that the characters had, and I threw emoticons into the script. And I think that for me is something that's really exciting about it. And yeah, there are some conventions. Generally, you want to italicize or indent stage directions, and you have to make it clear who's speaking at what point. But as long as you get the basics down, they know who's speaking and when, they know what's a stage direction and what's a line. If they can get that, most theater companies and places actually are drawn to non-traditional formatting, and I think that's a cool, creative way to write. That's not true of everyone, but at least the people I like to work with, it is.
I'm really surprised to hear that. I thought it was as uptight as screenplays, but apparently it's not. I mean, screenplays, there's a particular font that they want you to use. It's very specific.
And all the softwares, yeah.
Yeah,
I think for playwriting, what's interesting is when you actually like publish a play as a book. If you get like the Samuel French Actors Edition, or you get whatever, then it gets reformatted, and oftentimes actually stage directions are written into those. If you're reading like a classic Arthur Miller or Tennessee Williams play, all those stage directions are usually written by the stage manager of the original production and not the playwright. Sometimes it's the playwright, but that's often actually added to the script for the book version of it. When you have a script that actors are working with, it's generally a lot more bare bones, and the formatting is much less a part of it.
Whoa. Well, Gabe, on your end of things, I mean, can you get away with using emojis or emoticons? Or, I mean, can you go freeform, or is that pretty much locked in?
It really depends on what you're writing for. Like with MST3K, because a lot of it is like we're writing jokes. I'd say the things that really were important were timing of things. So we have like the timer, because if anyone's watched Mystery Science Theater, it's essentially like these people making fun of a film that is playing live. And so we have to time our jokes to fit in the right amount of time before there's dialogue. So there was very like specific things with that, like regarding timing. But when we were writing like the sketches or the intros and outros, those were general like screenplay formatting. But because it's like they're no longer attached to Netflix, so they can kind of do whatever they want. We just kind of threw together like our script, and and because a lot of that work does tend to be like improv too for the actors. They had this script, but oftentimes they would just kind of take it wherever they want. If they say it a different way, or they're like, actually, it sounds better this way, that's totally fine. Like, that's great. And it like we'll just change it up that day. And then like scripts for like I've been lucky that a lot of my short films, like I direct them. So as long as I know what it says and I can communicate that with like my cinematographer or my actors, like as long as I could do that, I don't put a lot of like my direction in there. It's more like, unless there's very specific content needs, like I have an intro that is like split screen. And so it's very important, like what is happening on each side, that has to go into it. So it's like literally just said like they're side by side, like these two things are happening concurrently. And then for my show, because we're primarily a podcast and we're just talking, there's not a lot of extra things happening. We generally write out our scripts in preparation for our blogs that we post. So that has all the information. And when we cite sources or we quote people, those are indicated in red. So we know like to bring those up on the screen and give them the right credit. So like they all have their different things, but it's more or less like pretty loose. I haven't had anyone like, you used the wrong font or like, what is this word? And like, I don't know, figure it out.
I think you made a really significant point too about timing. Like, okay, we're doing TV. TV is really timed. So for Producers Toolbox, we try to bring it in at 28 minutes. And really anything structured within television is going to be very precisely timed. And with a screenplay, you can go a little over, a little under. I'm guessing that with a stage, you can do that too. Or in a book, like, there are no limits really. But I want to talk a little bit with all of you guys about you've given some really good words of wisdom, and I'd like to get everybody's words of wisdom in too today. But if you can just give me a couple minutes to anybody out there who is thinking about dipping their toes in the waters of playwriting, for example, Brendan, what would you advise? Like now you really started very young and you went to classes and joined groups and things like that. It sounds to me, because that's a kind of rarefied thing, playwriting. So is that really the best way in, to take a class, to join a group? What would you say
I'd say there's no one way to get into playwriting. I was very lucky that I found it in high school and that I had the classes and groups in Philadelphia that I could go to cultivate that interest. But I know a lot of people get into playwriting because they love theater and they fall out of love with a certain aspect of theater, but still want to work in theater, and then they find writing as an alternative. I think really it's just about loving storytelling. It's about loving theater and liveness and everything that entails. And if you just start to hear your words out loud, even if it's just writing a monologue and having one of your friends read it to you, that for me is, that was the thing that started everything, the snowball effect. Once I started hearing other people make creative decisions about my writing, that changed the meaning for me or that made me reconsider it, that was what launched everything. So I'd say, to find out if playwriting is really for you, write a monologue and give it to one of your friends and annoy them and say, read this to me. I do that so many times with people, and it can be really, really impactful.
Oh my God, little explosions just went off in my head. I'm going to grab a couple friends and make them read some stuff back to me, because it's so solitary. And I am used to, like Gabe and you, working with other people, but the book thing is so singular. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to corral some people and say, please read it. And that does give you a much better sense of like how it's going to sound, how it's going to play. Wow. Well, you had a very nice piece of advice for anybody thinking about playwriting. Can you give us your nugget of wisdom, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, just for something that I've learned, I think a lot in playwriting about stage directions and dialogue and that balance. I say that when writing stage directions or really any non-dialogue descriptions, consider what is vital to the play, like what every possible production needs to have. and then delete everything else. For me, I think that if you have what's vital to the story in there, then the rest of it can be a surprise, and it can really take something in a new direction. So I'm excited by the bare bones, creating the story, what the story needs to be, and allowing the rest of it to be explored.
Wow. You actually just gave us a double hit of good advice. I mean, the other one being listen to somebody else read those words that you've written. And then I love that. Delete everything else that is non-essential, and you're left with the core stuff, which can pretty much be gold. Thank you. So, Gabe, you had a really good piece of advice too. But first, can you, like, if I'm somebody who wants to write for TV, what is my best entree to really get familiar with that particular arena?
Yeah. As I said before, just more or less doing it, right? Just like take that jump. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Because it's not going to be when you first start. Like, it's going to be like your first episode. It's going to be questionable. But you can't grow until you've seen it. And I think a big thing for me when I was first starting in any type of my writing is that it's like a really personal experience, even when it is in a collaborative environment. Like, I feel like I put a lot of work and effort into it, and I feel very strong like emotions towards my writing, no matter what it is. And a big thing that I've just had to overcome is just taking feedback in a way that doesn't like hurt you personally, right? Like understanding that that's not what it's there. It's not that they hate you and that you're the worst writer and that you need to quit. It's because they care about this work and they want your words and your ideas to come through in a way that is the best way that it can be. And so don't take feedback as a personal offense. That's something I still have to work on.
It really is, because you have to kind of, I mean, even though you've created this piece of work, you have to pull back a little in order to be able to contemplate it apart from yourself and accept any criticism as suggestions. And of course, you don't have to, make any changes just because somebody else said that's what they thought. You've got to be able to sift through that feedback. But it is important. And all of these genres involve an outside audience. It's not like you're writing it and you're the one who's going to watch it 50 times. It's geared towards the public or towards a particular segment of the public. So you do want to know that feedback, but you really don't want anybody to say anything mean that's going to, but you do have to like kind of get over it. If it is anything negative, you got to let it come in, say, yeah, maybe, or nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Keep going. Yeah. But it's important to invite that feedback. It really is. And we now that I count myself in there with a book writer, although I never want to do it again. It was so demanding, and there were no other people around, and it didn't involve music. So I know that's appealing to some people. But Brian, if I want to self-publish, how did you find the publishers? How did you go about that particular process?
Through Google, actually. Before Amazon, it was actually called createspace.com, but Amazon actually bought them, and it's just done through Amazon now. But yeah, I just Googled, how to self-publish a book, and found a couple articles. I read them, did a little research, and I submitted my book to be self-published. That's pretty much how I did it.
Is it an expensive process?
Yes and no. They have a lot of, like Amazon is something called print on demand, which basically means you only have to pay for whatever books you buy. They're only going to print whatever books they sell. Like, so you don't have to spend $1,000 to get your book printed like you would with like a vanity press. You can just submit it, and if they only sell 10 copies, then they're only going to print 10 copies.
Really?
So it's really out of cost pocket. But where it does get expensive is you got to hire an editor, you're going to have to hire a book designer, unless you could do that all yourself. But it's better to get professionals to do that.
It really
You're going to have to, you got to pay money for advertising. You're going to have to you have to buy your own copy of your book to send it to get it reviewed by professional reviewers.
Oh.
You know, get a press release. You're going to have to put all that out of pocket yourself. You know.
That's a lot of stages. I did not realize, though, that you could do it in kind of an on-demand way.
Yes.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you had, Gabe, I'm going to have to come back to you for your advice too, but Brian's had words of wisdom, which I have to say, like, I agree so wholeheartedly with. Tell me what you were sharing, Brian.
All right. What you do is write one chapter at a time. And I say this because before I wrote my book, you know, like someone suggested I should write a book about my drug addiction. Okay. And when I first thought about it, I was like, man, I got to write an entire book. It just seemed like a very daunting task, you know? So what I did, now they have this saying in 12-step meetings where they say 1 day at a time. So instead of saying staying sober the rest of your life, just stay sober for 1 day, just 1 day at a time. So I took that and applied it to writing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to write one chapter at a time, because it breaks it down and it doesn't seem like this big daunting task now that's going to last forever. Now all I have to do is just focus on that first chapter and then focus on the second chapter. And then and just made it a lot easier when I broke it down like that.
You know, I cannot tell you how valuable that was to me, because here I was thinking, oh, I'll do a picture book with some captions. And instead they said, okay, we want a 360-page book and we want it in 10 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, because I thought one chapter at a time. But it made it like a series of projects rather than one big daunting monolith of an effort. It was really, one chapter at a time. But wow. Well, Gabe, you had a wonderful piece of advice too. Would you please take us out with that?
Yes. This is what I tell anyone who interacts with me at PhillyCam in any of my classes or gets any consultations from me. I always tell people to not be afraid to leave pieces of yourself in your writing. Like, you're a unique person. You have your own experiences, thoughts, opinions, so much to you. And your work is only going to benefit from your unique perspective. And I think that's a value of like PhillyCam, like I'm always talking about it, but we are people power media, right? Right. So put yourself in there in any way, shape, or form. And I think it'll come out really beautifully.
Oh, thank you guys all so much. Brendan and Brian and Gabe, you really were wonderful. Thank you for sharing awesome information with us. And everybody out there, check these guys out online. I hope you'll read their books and watch their plays and television shows and enjoy them. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Producer's Toolbox. Thank you.